Before we get started with our getting cracked on controller/console video, I'd personally like to give a huge shout out to a fellow Fortnite content creator. You may have heard of Toby Wants Shinobi or played his Fortnite Zero Build training map yourself. I use it frequently and have also made content inside of the training map, so you may already be familiar with it. But if it wasn't for the countless hours he spent in developing this map, as well as all of his instructive Fortnite content, I wouldn't be half as good as I am. I will have his map code for the training map in the description, but make sure you consider giving him a follow over on Twitch at Toby Wants Shinobi or subscribing to him on YouTube as well. His content, master trainings, and community have helped myself and plenty others get better at Fortnite. Sensei Toby, if you're listening to this, we appreciate you and all your hard work, so let's go ahead and dive right in. Today, we're bringing a video of how to get cracked on controller, tips and tricks for playing Fortnite on console. So to start, we'll talk about what controller I have. I have the Razer Wolverine V3 Pro controller. I actually started out with the Razer Wolverine V3 Tournament Edition, just because that's the lower end version of this controller. I think it's about $100 less. And I had a horrible experience with it. I did not like the Tournament Edition in comparison to the Pro. The controller just felt really light. You know, I didn't really have an issue with it being wired. That is another really big difference between the Pro controller and the Tournament Edition, is that the Tournament Edition is, you know, specifically wired connection, not wireless. You know, doesn't really affect me all that much because my setup's pretty, you know, compact. I will admit, Razer, for some reason, cannot make a good USB-C cord. I was having issues in game where I would literally have my controller disconnecting while I was in the middle of the game, and because it's wired, when it loses power, like you just can't do anything. And so I would continuously be going back and trying to turn my controller back on. And so I did some research and I found out that Razer just makes really bad USB-C cords. I just wound up grabbing a USB-C cord that I use for my phone that was, like, you know, just long enough that it was usable, and I didn't have any issues with it dropping out on me in the middle of the match after that. It's not the USB-C port itself, it's the cord, because after I replaced the cord, I literally had zero issues with it afterwards. We do have these nifty 2 extra buttons up here in between triggers and bumpers up here. This one on the left, I have mapped to my X button, and so that's like interact, opening chests and whatnot, and also reload. And then this one I have set to B. I play on tactical, and so B doesn't really, it doesn't really do a whole lot. It does specific things, but it's just very, like, it's very infrequent that you use B in Zero Build for, you know, very much. And so for the most part, I had this one mapped over here to this for builds because it's just right there. And then you just kind of roll for builds when you're going in between doing all of your structures and stuff. And so it's like, this was mostly for playing builds that I had it mapped this way. But since I play Zero Build and I had them in that configuration, I just left it that way because that's what's most comfortable with me. And so I have my left stick to my top left paddle right here. And then I have my Y button right here underneath it. And so that's on my ring finger on my left hand. And then I have this as crouch, which is right stick. And then I have this as A. So you'll recognize that all 4 of my buttons here to the side of my right joystick are all mapped to different buttons. I've had my controller in that configuration for, you know, some time, and having the extra 2 bumpers up here is like really clutch. I do seriously stand behind this Pro edition of this controller. It's really good, and I probably will never play on a different controller for the rest of my life because it's just that good. The Pro version of this controller is phenomenal. It has such a great weight to it. If you want to play wired, you know, there's nothing wrong with it. It works perfectly fine wired. I play with it wireless because sometimes having the wire can get a little bit annoying when I have, you know, all this stuff up. I've just opted for the wireless version, and, you know, I have no complaints. You know, this controller does have these 2 extra buttons up here, which makes it really unique in comparison to other controllers, and it's mint. I moved all four of these buttons to my paddles and whatever to ensure that my right thumb never leaves my joystick. Those moments when you have to take your thumb off to jump, pickaxe, use B for whatever, and then X to reload, that moment in between doing that action and then taking your thumb off of the joystick are taking away from you being able to aim in the meantime, which is probably 80% of how you're dying. Probably the biggest thing in Fortnite is having to aim at the person that you're trying to eliminate, right? Let's jump over to settings real quick. If your console has 120 FPS settings, make sure that you have it enabled in your console settings first before you go into Fortnite to ensure that it's on both sides, right? And then also make sure that you have a 120 FPS monitor. It's much different if you have a controller and you're playing on PC. You can crank your FPS way up. That's just a PC thing, but if you're just playing on console and it's able to support 120 FPS mode, just make sure you have it enabled and that you have a 120 hertz or one something over 120 hertz monitor, you know, because if you don't have the monitor to be able to have 120 FPS and the 120 hertz, then there's no reason that you should be concerned about having it enabled in Fortnite because it's not going to work. I've got my brightness at 146. I don't have it all the way maxed out because I feel like if I have my brightness maxed out, it's just like my screen is just like glowing. It's like really annoying. Make sure you have motion blur off. I also have show FPS off and report performance stats disabled. For the most part, if you're playing on console and you have a wired connection versus playing over Wi-Fi, you don't really need to be concerned about what your ping is. You're just going to get what you get. There's not really a whole lot that you can do about it. And typically when I jump on, you know, I'll do an internet test just to make sure that I'm not getting crazy packet loss. Otherwise, you're on console. You just need to be concerned about getting good connection. And good connection is, you know, far and few when you're playing Fortnite ranked and stuff like that. And so, you know, you just got to take it for what it is. You know, just set your region to auto. I have mine on NA West. I know that that's what it's automatically going to sort me to because I live in Arizona. And so I do have auto open doors on. Some situations, very rarely, auto open doors is kind of, you know, hit or miss because occasionally, sometimes you'll accidentally open a door when you don't mean to. That has killed me a couple of times. I leave it on because it usually helps me more than it doesn't. Mantle activation and hurdle activation, I have both set to hold forward. This season and last season, they added glass to a slew of all of the windows that are around on the map. There have been people on PC, on controller, regardless of what you play on, people have been having issues with mantling and hurdling through windows, or just over things in general. For the most part, when you're mantling or hurdling, you're going to be pushing your joystick or W key, right? And so you're already going to be in the position to where you want to go forward through something. And so having it set to hold forward just makes it so that you don't have to be concerned about pressing A to try to get through something, or for me, you know, A on my paddle. It's just one less thing that you have to do. And so then if you go and mantle through something, you are already ready to jump if you need to. And if you're having the issue where you can't mantle through something or hurdle or whatever, you still have the option to press the A. So you give yourself two options to be able to get through a window or over something, which it'll register it both ways if it doesn't register the one, so that you're almost guaranteed to complete that action. You know, make sure that if you are trying to mantle or, you know, hurdle over something, you always have to look down just a little bit. And so especially with windows, because the height difference on windows versus like the small walls and stuff like that is just that much different. And so you always want to make sure that if you're trying to mantle through something, that you just look down over the horizon just a little bit to make sure that you get the prompt to go through the window or over the thing that you're trying to mantle, as well as, like I said, not having to take your hand off to make an action. You make sure that you have hold forward on and your thumb is on the right joystick ready to pull down just that little bit, so that you just kind of do both. You just spring through. Hold the swap pickup, pretty useful for when you are just in the beginning of the game and you don't have every inventory slot completely full. If you want to auto swap something and you have your inventory full, you just have to have that slot equipped and then it'll swap that item. But if you don't, and you don't want to just pick it up and then have to drop it, you can just hold it and it'll just auto swap that item or that weapon or whatever. You know, it's pretty useful. It's pretty useful for in the beginning of the game so that you don't waste much time trying to go into your inventory and then drop stuff and, you know, and so on and so forth. ADS while held. If you don't have it on while held, I don't know what you're doing. Always be spamming X when I jump onto the balloons, and there's other people that land on the balloons with me because I just want to make sure that like it's getting it before somebody else does. I do have preferred item slots on just for like a couple of things like my shotgun, my AR, and that's pretty much about it. I do have auto sort consumables to the right because I usually am just using my 1, 2, 3 slots unless I need to go all the way to the end for something. And so it's like, I may as well just have all my consumables go to the end. FOV, I have a curved monitor. For me, it's a little bit different than people that are playing on just a flat monitor because mine's curved in. And so I have the ability to have like a little bit wider of an FOV. Because of that curve, it just makes it feel a little bit more natural. But I have my minimum set at 72 and then my maximum set at 103. Okay, so game UI, I'll just make a recommendation that someone else made to me or, you know, to others. If you want to get really good at understanding where the middle of your screen is and then being able to see your surroundings and understand based off of your vision what you're aiming at instead of looking at your reticle, play with your reticle off when you're doing aim training every here and there. Don't do it like, you know, all the time, but there are certain activities where playing with your reticle off is going to actually benefit you than it is to have it on because it's one less thing that you have to be concerned about looking at. And then you're just using the information going to your eyes from what you're seeing on your screen to be able to understand what you're aiming at. And so it is much beneficial if you do it. But remember to turn it back on when you go into the game because when you get into your like long range engagements and stuff like that, you're going to want to have your reticle on. I have damage numbers set to cumulative, not list. I have it set to hit and icons, not hit only, because sometimes it's beneficial to know if you're hitting people for white health or shield, or, you know, if you're hitting a vehicle and stuff like that. And so numbers scale at 92%. I've tweaked that one several times because sometimes it feels like they're a little bit too big. Sometimes it feels like they're a little bit too small. And so I kind of tried to find like a middle ground. I played it at like 110 for like a while and it just felt huge. Incrementally turned it down. And then I got to 92%, and then I was like, okay, you know, I'm comfortable with this. So then we'll go to controller. A very important setting that you do need to be concerned with is slide hold time. Fortnite puts slide hold time at 0.250 seconds, and so you're talking a whole quarter second that you have to be holding crouch while either sprinting or walking to be able to enable a slide. So I have it set all the way down at the least that it can possibly be because you want to be able to just tap crouch and then go into a slide. If you firmly press your crouch button, if you're just at a walking speed, you're pretty much going to go into a slide. And then if you're in a sprint and you just tap it, you're pretty much going to go into a slide. Look sensitivities, and so I have them set individually. I don't use the preset normal, fast, whatever settings. I have them set at what I feel comfortable with. Funny enough, I was watching a video that Reet posted. He's a pro FNCS Fortnite player who plays specifically on controller. He did a sensitivity video a long while back, and I noticed that he had his horizontal and vertical sensitivities at 2 different numerical values, right? It made sense to me because if you think about it, things move across your screen a little bit slower than they fall. And so I was like, oh, okay, that makes perfect sense. Like why you would have it at 2 different sensitivities, right? And so I was like, oh, okay, like I had them originally at 34. No, I actually think I was 32 and 36. I progressively kept playing the aim training map, you know, a lot and kept going and really started fine tuning my sensitivities and stuff like that. And then I finally just like settled on what I have it on right now, which is 33 horizontal and 37 vertical. And I've just left it there. You ultimately have to understand how you play and see the things that you're doing in aim training, whether you're pulling too hard when you're going vertical. Like if you're pulling too hard and you're watching your reticle fall faster than the thing on your screen is falling, then you may want to turn your sensitivity down. But that's a decision that you have to make for yourself, and you have to understand the way that you play to make that decision. To be completely honest, if I'm making like a executive decision about my sensitivities, I'm more apt to tell myself that I need to get more comfortable playing at that sensitivity and just keep grinding it until I get that much better and get more focused and like have smoother aim on that joystick before I go and tweak my sensitivity. Because you're gonna play different one day to the next and the next and the next and the next every time you get on. And so it's better that you just leave that sensitivity alone and keep it where you feel comfortable and just tell yourself continue getting better playing with it like that than it is to continue tweaking your sensitivity, because you're always trying to make adjustments to what that percentage is going to be. I have my turning boosts at 0. That just means when you're going full stick all the way out, that there's no lead time to get up to that 100% velocity of turning speed. And so you're just going to get anything from in between 0 to full stick instantly. And then you have your boost ramp time. I have mine set at 0.20. Again, that's like how long it takes for you to get all the way up to full speed when you have it at full deflection, right? All the way out to the edge at your friction ring. But I've made comments in the past when I've been playing telling people that you want to stay off of this friction ring of your joystick as much as possible. You always want to be playing off of the middle of your joystick because that's just where the most sensitivity is going to be. That's where you're going to get all of your fine aim and stuff like that. And if you're pulling all the way to your friction ring, I almost think of it as like a strike. I want to be playing mostly off of the middle of my joystick than I do wanting to drag my joystick all the way across that 360 degrees on the outside, right? Because I'm very guilty of playing that way for a long time. I mostly played racing games and stuff like Ratchet and Clank and stuff like that, where you're playing third person and you feel like you have to, like, everything is at full tilt the entire time, right? And so that's kind of a bad habit that I've had to curve now that I've been playing controller for quite some time, is trying to keep my stick in the center instead of trying to play off of the friction ring on the outside. And then we'll go down into like my ADS sensitivities. I actually had it at 12 for horizontal and vertical, so just a little bit higher for a long time. I turned it down to 11. I've gotten really comfortable with playing it at 11, and that's just what I've kept it at. If you've watched me play, you know, even just recently this season, you've seen that I'm pretty good with the Deadeye AR. I think that my ADS sensitivities are pretty just fine where they're at for the way that I play. Horizontal boosts at 0, just like my turning boosts, same reason why. Turning boost ramp time I have set at 0. You don't really need to be concerned about it being at full deflection when you're ADS'd, because very rarely, like if you have to go all the way up, deflect all the way up, you want it like right now. And so you don't want it to take too long when you're trying to drag while somebody's like shockwaving up in the air or something. You want that like right now. And then I have my scoped speed multiplier actually just underneath 1. Most people have it set at 1 or like 1.1. I have it just underneath 1 because when I do go full deflection, 11% is actually a little bit too fast. And so I have it set just a little bit underneath 1 so that when I'm fully deflected and I'm ADS, it's the perfect speed. I swear it's the perfect speed. But that's for me. It's not for everybody, but that's just where I like it. Look, dampening time, 0. Have it set at 0. If you play on linear, there's nothing wrong with that. I played on linear for, you know, quite a while, and then I switched to exponential, I think just after chapter 5. And so I think chapter 6 season 1, I went to playing on exponential, especially for when you're doing long distance engagements. I feel like exponential gives you a little bit more breathing room of having kind of like sloppy aim. Just it doesn't, when you're in linear and you're doing those long engagements and you overcompensate with your right stick for your aim, it's much more consequential than it is to play on exponential in those engagements, because it's not trying to snap to where you're at that much faster. It gives you just like a little bit of breathing room. And so I feel like it's much better to play on exponential than linear, but to each their own. And then if you play on linear, your settings up above are going to be much different, because linear is just a completely different, it feels completely different. You'll know if you've played on both. Precision aim assist at 100% for obvious reasons. Tracking aim assist at 100% for also obvious reasons. I have both my dead zones set at 7%. If you have stick drift, you want to have your dead zones up higher. I recommend like 10 to 12. If you have stick drift, you're pulling pretty far away from the middle of the joystick region to be able to get it to register. You really don't want to have your percentages very low because you're just going to be getting false inputs and you're going to be doing stuff that you're not even trying to do. You can't go any lower than 5% on your trigger releases. But yeah, that's everything for settings. Don't listen to these people out here on the internet telling you that you have to give up playing on controller to be great at any video game. It doesn't matter if it's Call of Duty, Fortnite, or anything that you're interested in playing. Controller is for those that have the will and dedication to want to be good at it, just like at anything in life. If you are willing to put in the time and the effort to be able to understand how you can get better and see how you play and the things that you need to work on and take information from others and try to get a better understanding of how you can excel and succeed in this game as well as anything in life, keep grinding, have patience, give yourself grace, and you will be successful at everything that you do. It all just takes hard work and dedication. Put in the time and effort, it will pay its way back to you. And you know, there's always the satisfaction of knowing that you did it yourself. With that, that's going to be the end of this video. I hope you all enjoy. And if any of these tips and tricks were any bit useful for you, drop something in the comments and let me know. And also, if there's anything that you would like to add to the conversation that you would like to see me put in a future video, you know, hit me up. You can always comment down below and let me know what you think. But that's going to be it from your boy Colin Ray. I hope y'all enjoyed this video. Take it easy and continue to slay them all.